All right, hello everyone. So the video I'm going to be doing today is going to be pertaining to something that is actually my number one passion in a lot of ways outside of gaming, which is the Star Wars universe, which is the Star Wars expanded universe, and how far I want to delve into that and what I want to cover in this video and in potentially future videos is sort of TBD, as I figure out exactly what I want to do and say. But the reason why I'm making this video today is because of a tweet and a series of tweets that I saw from a guy named Chuck Wendig, which he is one of the new writers in the Star Wars universe. He came out with the Aftermath trilogy, which were the first books, and then in the new Star Wars expanded universe. Apparently everything now is canon. After Disney bought Star Wars from George Lucas and wiped all the old expanded universe stuff. For better and worse, mostly for the worst. But we're going to talk about that a little bit, and this guy's tweets that he's been putting out lately, mostly pertaining to the idea of an expanded universe and what that means in an ongoing universe like Star Wars. And as someone who was really, really, really heavily invested in the old expanded universe of Star Wars, I feel like I have something to say on this matter. So let's just start with this tweet, which got my whole train of thought going in this way. This is where everything is going to stem from. Okay, so Chuck Wendig says this, and this is July 19th, 2018. So he says, well, canon usually just means, quote unquote, which books belong in a particularly authentic catalog, which admittedly has its own problems, but canon in genre work is tricky at best. Okay. It's hard to keep a complex plot straight in a single novel-sized story. Something like Star Wars is dozens of stories across multiple media with hundreds of creator input points. Stuff is going to get fiddly by its nature, and for me, I like getting a little fiddly. So on this point, I mean, I completely agree, because as someone who, ingested a lot of the old Star Wars canon over the years, and I even came into it late. So I came into it when it was really starting to shape up a lot more. Which was toward the mid to late 90s, once Timothy Zahn came on, and then a lot of stuff we got leading up to the prequel trilogy and all that, and everything that sprung up even after that. Things were, early days. If you go back to the early expanded universe books, like things like A Splinter of a Mind's Eye and just a lot of the early stuff, it was really kind of weak and just disjointed, and I don't know, there's this and that, and they had a lot of good ideas for certain characters and stories, but they eventually started like reining things in, at least in terms of the novels. But I'm not going to sit here and say that even the old expanded universe that I love, was perfect. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, there's no, like he's saying in these tweets, there's no way to keep this perfect continuity where characters and situations and rules and just things of the universe, like you can't constantly have something perpetually in motion, as far as like something like Star Wars, which is a vast universe, and like have everyone working on anything at any given time, perpetually in tune with what it should be. So there's going to be some weird stuff here and there. There's going to be some facts and story beats that are like, you're like, wait, no, that wouldn't happen. This and that. I get that. That's fine. And what I've been saying from the beginning with this, because I've had some friends that have been reading a lot of the new expanded universe books from the beginning, like comics, the novels, stuff like that. They've been saying like, well, this is all kind of weak, and yeah, I'm sure it is. Just like I'm sure a lot of it was weak after the original trilogy came out, because there's people are figuring it out. They're figuring all this stuff out, and while I haven't read any of Chuck Wendig's books myself, what I've heard, what I've read online, they're not good. Like I said, I'm not here to judge him. I'm just judging what he's saying about canon and continuity in a vast universe right now. So getting back to, all this being like, well, it's kind of everything's in a state of motion. It's just like, all these books that you're reading right now, like comics and stuff like that, like it's just kind of like this vague filling in the blank of stuff. Like I've been saying for a long time, that you're not even going to have anything meaningful happen EU-wise until after the new trilogy is done, because that sets the kind of gold standard for what the expanded universe is going to be moving forward. And that makes you wonder, like, who are these characters matter? Who are these characters going to live or die? What is being established in the new trilogy, and what is going to carry forward? And so, like, all these writers are just sitting here like, I don't know, we're just playing it safe with our things that we're writing, because you can't really write anything, you can't really reveal anything, you can't really do anything groundbreaking until you know the parameters of what you can work within. You know what I'm saying? Like the main story, like, because how the expanded universe works is like knowing the rules of the canon universe. And, like I said, it's all canon now, but you have to know that, like, what is canon in the main trilogy. And that's why I've been so critical of the new movies, and why I hate The Last Jedi, and why I think it just completely ruins everything, because there's not this established rule set and trilogy of movies now that you expand everything out from. And if people don't even like that stuff, then, like, how do you expand upon that? And so let's get back into some of these tweets here. And this is one of the major ones. This is the first one I saw, which is the problem with canon is that it demands viewing story as a series of rigorously tested data points. It demands we view story pieces as historically true, which is weird because A, it's fiction, and B, even real-ass history is full of wild, ragged contradictions and retcons. Yeah, like I said, like I was talking about earlier, this is the same thing. This is the same thing that happened with the Star Wars universe before, the expanded universe, which I love. The difference here is that, like, look, I'm not going to defend any one part of the old, what is considered now the Legends universe of the Star Wars EU. But I have to say, like, fans of Star Wars, and even me personally, like, what made me a fan of Star Wars more than anything was the expanded universe. And it was fun back then because you never thought that George Lucas was going to go beyond, Episode 6. You never thought you would see anything after Return of the Jedi. So what would happen after that was all up to everyone's imagination. And so Del Rey had all these, authors come in and start writing these stories. And they were a little rough at first. They weren't great, but they were like, they focused in on the main characters, like Luke, Leia, and Han. And that's what carried it through for so many years. And even until the end of the Legends run, I mean, Luke, Leia, and Han were still alive. They were, in their 70s at that point. And while the story was this was after dozens and dozens of books. I mean, the story was starting to get a bit like, all right, what are you guys trying to do here? And I know you're not trying to kill these characters, so where is this going to eventually go? But I much prefer the old EU to the new, where Luke, Leia, and Han just die for no reason up front. And all this stuff, with like Leia and Han and The Force Awakens, and they were estranged from each other. They stopped being together, and they had this kid, and he's like, in the books, that was a way more satisfying arc. And I know the movie can't do what like 50 books did or whatever, but like still, you had a more satisfying arc. You saw in those books, they had children and they raised them, and you got to know the children. And so now we're coming into it with this new trilogy where it's just like all the terrible things that could ever happen. It's like the worst case scenario of an expanded universe post Return of the Jedi, where the main three characters are not at any place where you would want them to be, and you don't care about their motivations and what they're trying to do, and they all just seem like downers and terrible people. And so I don't want to get into why I hate the new trilogy, because that's a whole other thing. But what I'm trying to say is, talking about how you handle an expanded universe, well, you treat everything like it's important. And so, like, even back in the day, you would have these expanded universe books that just built on, like, you would have some of those, like, Tales from Jabba's Palace, where they would just tell these little side stories, and they were kind of corny in a way, but they would tell these, like, stories about the little people you see in the background here and there in the scenes, and all these random people that, like, like Bib Fortuna and Salacious Crumb, and I mean even the dude that like was the guy that like was taking care of the Rancor and the Rancor pit that you see in that one scene when the Rancor dies, and he's like, ah! Like they told a whole separate story, and like that stuff is lame and it's silly, but that like those people were just like dissecting the movies and figuring out how you could make stories and expand the universe out of the movies, and that's what you want to do. But at the core of it was like, no, everyone liked the characters that were prominent and important in the movies. They even expanded upon those, and those were like the sacred cows. Those were like the sacred people. And you had these really, like, like I said, at the books I was reading before they canceled the Legends universe, Han Solo was still kicking ass in the Millennium Falcon at like 70 years old. And I don't want to tell you about certain details about other characters and things that happen in that timeline if you want to go and read it. Because, look, I'm going to tell you this one thing right now. If you're not happy with the Star Wars universe as it is right now, I cannot recommend the Legends universe enough. I mean, I got a few of the books here because I've been recollecting some of the ones that I lost along the way. But there's nothing more satisfying than those old books. Nothing. So, if you're going to have these characters like now in the new trilogy, like Poe, Rey, Finn, like, so once we get to the end of this trilogy, when Episode 9 comes out, which I'm not going to watch, I'm not going to go watch it. I don't care. What is Disney doing for the universe beyond that? Are you going to try to keep those characters going? Because that's what people would want. Like, in a perfect world, people would have liked movies or some kind of media that picked up after The Last Jedi. Because that's all anyone that was a Star Wars fan fantasized about for years after watching Return of the Jedi. It's like, where do these characters go after this? And a lot of the old authors of the expanded universe picked up the slack, and they did a really good job. And this is another thing I want to iterate. I want people to know, like, I don't, every author. I mean, and here's the thing: is like a lot of the old expanded universe books. I mean, there was a lot of authors. There's like, I'm not even taking into consideration the video games, which some of them were really good, and they in turn incorporated some of those characters into the expanded universe books. There was comic books that was good. I didn't get into I never read any of the comics, so I don't know. Maybe there was a huge disparity between comics, novels, games, all stuff. I don't remember everything about that, but I just know that all the best stuff was always like moved forward as like, this is like cool, while still keeping the main characters and the things you loved about Star Wars. So it was, the expanded universe was literally expanding upon the universe. It was keeping everything you loved and expanding upon it, which is what it should be. So now where we are with Star Wars is like, I don't really care about any of this. I don't give a shit about anything in the Star Wars movies. Like, who are these characters? Like, I don't. Rey, Finn, and Poe, are these gonna are these gonna be the characters moving forward? Rose Tico. I mean, these are the people that are driving the new Star Wars vision forward. These are people I want to be reading books about and all that stuff moving forward. I mean, granted, there was always a way for the books and expanded universe to like build up some of these secondary characters and stuff like that and make them better. And I'm cool with that. I'm down with that. But you're not giving me like the main like cast, the main core vision of what I should be caring about. Like, you're not telling me what I should be like focusing on. Like, where is the foundation here? Where is it? Because I'm not seeing it. And in the few books I've read, the few comics I've skimmed through and all this other stuff, it all just seems lame to me. And I know we're having to reset the universe, so that, like I said, I already explained all this before. When you reset everything and there's not like a foundation, you have to, but this is not, none of this. I'm saying the most epic storylines in Star Wars were already told in the expanded universe. In case any of you didn't know, the New Jedi Order, you want to read the most epic Star Wars storyline? Go read the old Legends New Jedi Order series. It's about a 19 book series. That's a huge investment. And granted, you're not even going to get the most out of that unless you read everything prior. But like, I'm telling you, the Disney Star Wars is never going to give you anything more epic than that storyline in that book series. I don't know, the books are always better this and that. I know. And, when Disney took over for Star Wars and they wiped clean the old expanded universe, that was very hurtful. It was terrible. But I was like, but this is finally the time when we can have like a visual representation of what I've always wanted the expanded universe version of Star Wars to be, which is like the real good version of Star Wars. Like, make no mistakes about it. I mean, the original trilogy is great. The prequels, I don't want to get into a debate about that right now. I like certain aspects about it, but one thing I will say, regardless of how you feel about the prequel trilogy movies, they expanded on the universe in a way that made Star Wars even better. And not necessarily from the movies themselves, but just the little details and things that they had in there that then other people took and expanded upon in the expanded universe through books, comics, video games. And they made it all better. I mean, people love the Clone Wars cartoon. I haven't watched it yet. I've watched some of it. I can't get into it. I want to try it. But this is how you make Star Wars good, is like, you trust these other people to like pick up the torch and do good things, but while also adhering to the main storyline. And then that's been my problem with the whole Star Wars storyline. of this new trilogy from the get-go, especially when Rian Johnson's movie just destroyed everything. Because that just, like, you have to base everything around your trilogy. Everything has to be focused on the trilogy. And then everything born out of there just expands upon it. But when you have a shitty foundation to stand upon, then everything just slides into mud. It's terrible. So everything now with the expanded universe is just up in the air. Who knows? But what I'm seeing so far, I don't like any of it. And that's why I've started rebuying stuff. Like the Old Republic. Some of the best fucking shit from the expanded universe. This stuff. Right here. Started with the game. Started with the games back in the day on the original Xbox. Because, I mean, this is what people wanted from the prequel trilogy, and we got it. But even more so, you wanted to see these epic Jedi-Sith battles and all of that. And that was the old... You wanted to know the history of the Jedi and the Sith. And that's kind of what they teased and maybe promised with... with episode 8, you thought Rey was going to meet up with Luke, and they were going to talk about Luke was going to have this new, like, ancient knowledge of the Jedi and the Sith, and that's why he was there on that. I don't want to get into that. This stuff tears me up. But what I'm trying to say is, like, so in this tweet he says, right, don't get me wrong, you definitely want consistency and authenticity, binding stuff together, but as in life and history, stuff is rarely going to line up invisibly, and for some, and for me, some of the fun is in how it doesn't, and that leaves room for fan theories and fanfic. Like, I don't agree with that. Like I said, when you have a universe like this, you have all these moving parts. Sure, you can't... There's going to be some different things that you might have to retcon, especially when you're just pumping out things. But my hope in the beginning, with Disney buying this out and taking over and resetting the expanded universe, was that it was going to be better. And it was going to be like, no, you literally cannot tell any storyline. You cannot make up shit in this universe unless it has been gone through 10 layers of people that are like a team of people are going to be like, no, this and that. And I understand that is constantly a ever evolving thing as you develop your own universe and lore. And there's people that are like, fact checking all this stuff. And it's changing on the fly. Someone comes out with a new book or a new movie, and they say this about a character, and like, oh, this is canon now, so this weapon or this ship or this planet is like different, and then this is now... I understand it's complex and crazy. Like, I get that. But I mean, for me personally, and for a lot of other people I know, it's not just me, it's a lot of Star Wars fans I know, they were invested in the old expanded universe, and they were very, very, very satisfied, even when things, fell short sometimes, even if it took a while to get it going. Like I said, I mean, I don't want this new expanded universe to take 10, 20 years to, like, really start feeling like, oh, no, now this is cool. It's like, no, like, if you're going to do this in this day and age... Like, it needs to be cool from day one. Because the whole... The difference is... This is the main difference, okay? And this is what I want to say. Back then, because a lot of people criticizing the new movies, like things like Snoke, because it's like, oh, we didn't have an explanation for who the Emperor was and all this stuff, all this backstory to things in the original movies. Like, well, there was no precedence for that stuff then. People expect a different level of storytelling now. People expect, like, deep lore and details and stuff in their fucking Star Wars, in anything now. And you got to come at it with that knowledge that, like, telling stories in through movies, even in the science fiction genre back in the late 70s and early 80s and all that stuff, completely different from 2018. For better or worse, that's just the reality of it. Because there's a thousand other entertainment mediums that can tell you a story just like this, and they can do it better. So you have to come with big guns. You have to come out here and act like you know what the fuck you're doing. And that's why this is annoying with this expanded universe shit. Since Disney has taken over, it's like you thought they were going to bring the big guns. And I mean, you look at Marvel and the comic book movies that they're doing, and they're just knocking it out of the park. But that's a smaller thing because the MCU, is just the movies. Whereas like Star Wars is like the movies, books, game, all this other stuff. So it's way more complex. But like I said, they were juggling that 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even better than they are now. And like I said, that was knowing, like the old EU was never canon, but a lot of us thought of it as canon because we never thought anything would happen after episode 6. But you can still do that if you have a team of people, if you have people involved that really care and really want this stuff to be good. And if you don't, it's just going to be trash and everyone's going to hate it. And then we are where we are now with Star Wars, where like no one's excited, no one's enthusiastic about this brand. I mean, we're still, some of us like me, I still love Star Wars. We're coasting by on decades old fucking enthusiasm at this point. And maybe that'll just carry us through for the rest of our lives. We've already had to watch all our favorite characters get the worst possible treatment in the new trilogy. And it's not even over with. I guess we're going to watch Lando get fucked in the last movie. And who is someone going to replace Carrie Fisher? Is someone going to replace Princess Leia? Is she going to be recast? Is she going to be CGI'd? And the books are trash. Everything's just... You got people like Chuck Wendig, who is a complete SJW idiot, talking all kinds of stupid shit. Even if I can agree with some of his points when it comes to canon, it's just like, these are the people we have working on Star Wars now. I can name you 10 authors off the top of my head that wrote past Star Wars books that were fucking slayers. Slayers. James Luceno, Michael A. Stackpole, Steve Perry. I mean, there's just a bunch. I mean, it's just... There... And especially getting into it right here and then. I know you've been waiting for it this whole time. The SJW shit. People were doing this positive female, positive diversity stuff years ago, but you know what? People weren't shoving it up your fucking asshole. They just did it, and you just cared about diverse characters because they were fucking cool. So, if you want people to care about your black character, your Asian character, your weird alien person with weird sexuality, guess what? You just make them fucking cool. And you just make the stories surrounding them cool. That's how you do it. Tell good stories. People show up. People care. People go watch your movie multiple times. People buy your books. People buy your comics. People do all that. You know why? Because they like your fucking characters. They like the stories. Do that. Do that first. Get a solid foundation. Define rules for the universe. Say this can't happen, this can't happen. Holdo flying a ship through a fleet of other ships in hyperspace. That's not keeping your universe in check. Okay? It's not. All this other stuff you're doing surrounding all the social issues, political issues, trying to make a statement with your movie, trying to be edgy, trying to be cool, Rian Johnson. No, it's not what Star Wars is about. Tell good stories. Make people care about characters. Even characters that weren't in the movies they've never seen. They can visualize them. I did that for years. Some of my favorite Star Wars characters are in the books, not in the movies. You know how people did that? They told me good stories with good, compelling characters. They had character arcs. That's how you do that shit.